Okay, so we're going to look at excretion. For some reason, the end of Form 4, everyone has switched off, and now this is one of the topics that you can't get to grips with. So this is just kind of going to give you some pointers, some direction, and we'll just see how it turns out. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to have a definition for excretion, and it is a weird one. So what's really, really important in terms of your definition, it is the elimination of metabolic waste, so that you're getting rid of your metabolic waste. That word is really, really important. You need to include the fact that it's made in the body and it is removed from the body. It's a very, very weird one. So why the hell are we doing that? The whole point of it is because of homeostasis. So obviously you're going to need your definition for homeostasis. And what is homeostasis? This is the ability to maintain a constant internal environment. So if you think about it now in terms of excretion, obviously then you need to understand what it is that we excrete and how might that influence homeostasis for us if we couldn't get rid of it. So what do we excrete? So you need to be aware that in terms of excretion, we are getting rid of carbon dioxide and water via our lungs. We are getting rid of salts and water via our sweat. And we are also getting rid of, via our urine, urea, salts again, and water. So if we have excessive carbon dioxide in our blood, then it's going to kill us eventually if we couldn't get rid of it. The water, again, we get rid of water every time we excrete. The salts and the urea, they're going to build up and become toxic. If you know anyone that has to go through kidney dialysis, that's their issue. They can't get rid of urea. So that's the reason why we do excretion. How about though if you are now a plant? What is it that plants have to get rid of? So obviously they are losing water and oxygen through their stoma every day. The oxygen isn't so bad because that can be used in respiration. But while they don't make a huge amount of waste, anything they do make, they have to get rid of it. So they do it via losing leaves and petals. So they're quite clever. They'll put it all to the leaf and they'll literally go through leaf drop. They'll get rid of it via barks, via seeds, and via fruit. Okay, so we then have to know a little bit more about excretory organs that we have. So the first one that we're going to look at is going to be the skin. Now you do have to know your different layers in here. I've just taken one of our photos from the exam papers. You have to just be aware of what things are. So in this one, the A is obviously your hair. Here is going to be your erector muscle. We have 3 layers to our skin up here that you can just about see. So, and they all form part of your epidermis. So we have on top the cornified layer. This is, if you scratch yourself, you'll take off that skin, it'll go under your fingernails. It's your oldest layer. It's got dead cells essentially. In the middle, which is this kind of very light layer here, this layer is then called your granular layer. So it's slightly older skin, but now this is where our waterproofing starts. And then at the very, very bottom we have, and I like the word, as you know I like certain words, your Malpighian layer. Malpighian, however you wish to pronounce it. And this is where mitosis happens. So M for Malpighian, M for mitosis. All of these together make up our epidermis. So we're not quite plants with a dermal layer, we have an epidermis. Everything else from this down is part of your dermal layer. So there's an awful lot of stuff going on in your dermal layer. Obviously B is your blood supply, your capillaries. Over here, this will be a sweat gland down here. Sweat glands have ducts, and until we get on top, they have pores up here. And then this will be to detect temperature. We know our skin does temperature in there. What else do we need? We've done our erector muscle, and down here we have our layer of adipose tissue. So fat layer, insulating layer. That's the whole point of your adipose. Also protects the organs that are underneath. So you know a job of each of the one. And then we have to know what is it that the protective functions of our skin is. So how does our skin protect us? Seems to be a very big pen today. Okay, so what are the protective functions of our skin? So what are we looking for? So the epidermis itself is waterproof. So that is great. And it is the keratin in our skin that does that for us, makes our skin waterproof. It also prevents microorganisms getting into our skin and pathogens, stops them getting in, so that's always a good thing. The dermis itself, we've just said there, the whole point of that, it is you want to protect your internal organs from being battered and bruised. So that's its protective function. We make a chemical called melanin. So if you're naturally sallow skin, dark skin, you make more melanin than somebody with red hair and very pale skin. And the whole function of this is it protects your skin against UV rays. So that obviously reduces your risk of skin cancer. And then the other thing, and we see this in the joy of puberty, is sebum. So sebum is an oil that's made, and again, that stops your skin from drying out. Okay, and there would be a sebaceous gland. I don't think there's a picture of one in our diagram, but that's how it gets out of your pores. There'll be sebaceous glands at the bottom. We also make vitamin D. So the joy of making vitamin D means we can absorb more calcium from our diet, and that's obviously very important for our bone strength. The last thing that we have to do in terms of our skin is we have to understand what is the process by which we regulate our temperature when we are both cold and hot. So when we went through this in class, we gave you keywords I gave you keywords. So what were they? So we had this word which was called piloerection. So again, if you can keep the words in your head, this just means your hairs stand up. We had the word vasoconstriction. So if you can work out the constriction is to make something small. Vaso kind of sounds like blood vessels. Essentially your arterioles, we're going to be specific in terms of our blood vessels. They contract, they take up less space. That will prevent heat loss. Should have said up here that the hair standing up, that's going to trap heat in your atmosphere for you. We've also said that you can shiver. So when you think about when you're cold, we shiver, and shivering is going to produce heat, and in that way you raise your body temperature. And the one that we said that you had to kind of learn that wasn't maybe intuitive is you increase your thyroxine production. And this is related to your endocrine system. And the whole point of this is when you increase thyroxine, you increase the rate of your metabolism. So you start doing respiration more, and that's going to generate heat in itself, and therefore you're going to be warmer. So temperature regulation, you need to recognize what they're asking when they ask the question, but we're looking for the word piloerection, vasoconstriction, shivering, and as I say, this is one you just have to learn or know. This is like the bonus one. You increase your thyroxine production. That's what we do when we're cold. What do we do when we are hot then? So is there any words that we can use or scenarios that we can link into? So temperature regulation when we are hot. So obviously the first one that's obvious is we sweat. And the whole point of sweat is, believe it or not, once the water evaporates from your skin, it actually has a cooling effect. So it's a little bit of chemistry in there. As the water evaporates, it cools your skin, so that's always good. You go red-faced. So instead of vasoconstriction, now we have vasodilation. So our blood vessels, arterioles, they actually get bigger now. And again, if they're bigger, they can get rid of heat quicker. It's a surface area thing. So they will get rid of heat. So again, that's going to help now cool you down to maintain your constant internal environment. And the other thing it does, if we think of piloerection for when it's cold, your hairs will lie flat. So obviously now they are not trapping heat. Okay, so structure of your skin, protective functions. How do we regulate temperature when it's cold? How do we regulate temperature when it's hot? Okay, so you give yourself, you just use the words and you bulk out if you feel you need to. The other side of our excretion chapter is going to be on our kidney and our urinary system. So apologies now for all the moving of your screen. So before we get to the specific looking at kidneys and nephrons, you need to be able to draw for yourself what it is that our urinary system looks like. So you need to be able to draw your kidney, you need to know your blood vessels, you need to know what's the big blood vessel that feeds into your kidney that goes away from your heart versus the blood vessel that takes the blood away. So if you can notice, if you can notice here that I've kind of drawn, I'll put this in the background just so you can see, a really thick red blood vessel and a skinnier one going into your kidneys. And you have to remember which blood vessels go from your heart. So your blood vessels from your heart are all going to be arteries. You need to know the name of your arteries. This is essentially dirty blood going in because it's unfiltered. Your kidneys act as a filter, and then coming out we have a small blood vessel, and we're now going back to our heart. So you need to know the names of these blood vessels now. So the aorta is the one that comes from our heart. The one that goes into our kidney does what it says in the tin. So it is an artery, so it's going away. Because it's going into our kidney, we put the word renal in front of it. So similarly, coming out of our kidney, we have a vein. This is going to go back toward the heart, and because it's coming from the kidney, it's a renal vein. And then we need to know the name of the vein that feeds the heart, and the vein that feeds the heart sounds like a great bottle of wine. It is your vena cava. We also need to know then that from our kidneys we get 2 tubes that feed into a little muscular bag for us. And these tubes, there's a difference between the names. So this muscular bag is our bladder. The reason I can remember the difference between the names is if you've ever held your urine in and you couldn't wee because you were in a car, motorway, wherever it was, and when you finally get to sit on a toilet, I guarantee you'll just go, ah. So urethra is the exit, and these 2 guys up here are called your ureters. Obviously, these are your kidneys. So you just need to be aware of those, what it is that they do, what are your blood vessels that are involved. Okay, not so much asked at higher level, but will be asked at ordinary level. So we now go to here, looking at our kidney. You need to be able to draw a kidney. You need to be able to draw a nephron. You need to know where the processes that a kidney goes through take place. So there's only 3 parts to a kidney, which is brilliant, that you need to know. Along the outside here in A, we have what is called the cortex. B down here is called the medulla, and if you look at it, it's kind of these little pyramids when we draw them in. And C, the place where all your urine connects, is called your pelvis. So you need to be able to identify those, and you also have to know the jobs that they do. So in our cortex, we do the process of filtration, so that's where our kidneys filter our blood. In the cortex and in the medulla, we do a process of reabsorption. So all this means is all of the good stuff that got filtered out, it goes back into your blood because you're going to need the good stuff. So we'll work out what that is in a minute. And then finally we have a thing called secretion, And this happens again in your medulla. And the whole point of secretion is we will lose H plus ions and potassium ions that would make sure that the pH of our blood is staying constant. So that is the point of secretion. Okay, so stuff goes from your blood into your kidney, and this is to control your blood pH. One of the big jobs of your kidney is in what's called osmoregulation. So it's one of the reasons why we do homeostasis. So the point of the kidney is that it wants to maintain the salt-water balance in your blood. It's related to osmosis. Will more osmosis, less osmosis happen? It just wants to maintain the salt-water balance in your blood. Now, this is a reason why we do homeostasis. The other main reason that we do homeostasis is to keep the temperature right for our enzymes, and so that they can work at their optimum. Now, we've talked about the three things. So filtration does what it says in the tin. You're filtering your blood. It's getting rid of lots of different things. We have reabsorption, which is going to take the good stuff back into your blood. And finally, we have secretion going from your blood into your kidney. And this is important for the pH of your blood. Now, you do have to be able to, I don't know if that sounds good English, but you have to be able to draw a nephron. So I've given you the silly thing of cup, squiggle, loop, squiggle, candy cane. And that will do. You can put in a blood supply, and just as long as you realize there's a red part of the blood and then there'll be a blue part. And essentially when we draw it, we draw our capillaries around here, because this is where things are being absorbed. But it may be that you have, red going here. You can see over here in this diagram that we will have a whole load of little capillaries in here. We have blood vessels coming in to this part of our organelle, and we have blood vessels going out. And it's the size of these guys is really important. So you can't really see it from this diagram up here, but you can see it from mine. So this little vessel here is much smaller than the vessel on this side, which is bigger. You're going to need to have to know them. But the whole reason why we have this difference in size is this ensures that we actually filter things in, that they all go into this part of the cup. So you need to know the names of the nephron. So the cup is the Bowman's capsule. The first squiggle is called your proximal convoluted tubule. If you can remember it, it would be great. But proximal tubule, they'll be happy if you do. We then get to our loop. We have the descending loop, because this is going down essentially. It's called the loop of Henle. We then go to the ascending loop of Henle, and we then have our second squiggle. So cup, squiggle, loop, squiggle. This is called the distal convoluted tubule. So convoluted just means it's got loads of twists and turns in it. And finally, our candy cane is the collecting duct. Now, we also have to know the blood supply. So obviously we know from our diagram of our urinary system that this vessel here is our renal artery. So we know that part, but we now have to have names for the bigger and smaller. So the bigger is called an afferent, just meaning it comes before arteriole. And up here in our diagram, the smaller is called the efferent. So in my head, I'm remembering it like the alphabet. A comes before E. Okay, you're then going to have a whole load of capillaries over here. And finally, we're going to have, going back in blue, it's going to become renal venule, and then finally it'll become our renal vein. So you do have to be able to draw it, but usually they'll give you a diagram and you now have to label it or identify the parts on it. So what are the things that we have to know about? One thing that I just haven't said is this part of our blood supply is a thing called the glomerulus. So the glomerulus and the Bowmans are in the same place. They do the same job. This is where filtration happens. And you have to work out in your head what are the things that are in blood that could possibly be filtered. So what I like to do is I like to make a list of everything that's in your blood, and then we go from there. So we have red blood cells, you'll have white blood cells, you'll have your platelets, you'll have plasma, or the liquid part of your blood in there. So there'll be some water in there. You'll also have digested nutrients, so you're going to have glucose, amino acids, you'll have vitamins and minerals. You will have some hormones in there. You will have antibodies in there. And you have to make the decision or recognize what is getting filtered. So when it gets filtered, so this is what's in our blood. When it gets filtered, you have to then know what is the filtrate. When it gets in there, it's called glomerular filtrate. And you have to work out what is going to get in. So these guys are not going to get in because they are too big. So they physically won't get in. But we know that now you're going to get water, definitely is going to go in there. Glucose. Ooh, can you see what I've forgotten? Maybe you're now shouting at the screen. We'll definitely get some vitamins. We will get some hormones in there. But the thing that we forgot are the excretion products, urea and salts. So obviously they are going to be in here because we want to get rid of them. So these things here are all useful to your body. You're going to want them back. So by the time we are done, you know already that in our urine, you are going to have water, you are going to have salts, and you are going to have urea. There will be hormones because this is how we test for pregnancy. So there will be some hormones that will be in there, but there'll be also some hormones that will not be able to get back in. So some hormones will not get through. So you need to be aware of what's in our glomerular filtrate. The other part of this that candidates have issues with is what gets absorbed and where. So I came up with two stupid little sentences. The first one is Omansa, and the second one is a sentence. It is my nan serves sizzling noodles. This tells you how water or where water is absorbed, and this talks about the glucose and the amino acids and all the good stuff that we need to get back in. So if we look up here at these guys, and we're now looking at water, and we're looking at the useful things that we need to get back into our blood. If we start with the Mansa, the M stands for most, the A stands for a little, the N stands for none, the S stands for some, and the A here stands for a little. So in terms of our nutrients then, again, most, some, apologies, I forgot my own little saying. So it's my nan, bless her. So none, some, none. The question that they most commonly ask is, where does most reabsorption take place? And this is going to be in your proximal convoluted tubule. So even if you don't remember the rest, if you can remember that most absorption happens in your proximal convoluted tubule, you will do brilliantly. You just also need to be aware, please, of the processes by which reabsorption occur. So there are 3 of them. There is, how does water get reabsorbed? So we know that anything to do with water is going to be osmosis. So that's easy. We know for other nutrients that they will not, because they're not water, because osmosis is essentially the diffusion of water, that there's going to be diffusion. And we know from our definition from diffusion, you are moving from high to low concentration. So if you have loads of glucose in your nephron, it's going to want to go back into the blood. But what happens when we now have high to low concentration gradient? We want to have active transport. So once you're getting to up here, obviously all of the water is going to be by osmosis, but when we talk about most of our useful things going back in, that is going to be diffusion. And when you're getting down here, it will be diffusion in your ascending probably, but here we're now getting toward the active transport idea. So you just need to be aware of that. I think I may have said this wrong. So it'll definitely be diffusion in your descending. It'll be diffusion in your ascending, so on the way back up our loop. But we'll also start hitting the active transport toward the end of that, because we now have low concentrations of things in there. Okay, so moving back over here to look at our nephron. The things that they are going to ask now is, as well as what's filtered and where, what's too big to get in. They are also going to want to know, how is your nephron adapted for its job? So in the glomerulus, the fact that you have the afferent and efferent arterioles, so the very big tube going into your glomerulus and it's smaller on the outside, it means that when you push your blood in under pressure, it's got nowhere to go but out. So it'll squeeze into your glomerulus, it'll filter out the water, and all of the good stuff will go into, your Bowman's capsule from your glomerulus, because it's squashed. There's nowhere else for it to go. There is a real large surface area in the glomerulus. There's loads and loads of capillaries in there, and that allows for filtration to happen really, really fast. These capillaries are different to the capillaries that we have, or the rest of us, around our body, because they're actually more porous. So they actually want to lose what's flowing through them. And the other part that makes this all work is that our Bowman's capsule is 1 cell thick. So in that way, then, whatever is filtered out of our glomerulus will be able to just fly into our Bowman's capsule. Okay, so the last bit of this then, in terms of the rest of our adaptations, we will have the proximal convoluted tubule, so the first squiggle. That again is 1 cell thick, so it's going to be really good at doing a reabsorption. It's very long, so that's going to give time for reabsorption. And again, just like in your ileum, it has villi inside it, and that's going to increase your surface area. So it's got the infoldings, and the whole point of that is going to be increase your surface area. Again, there will be mitochondria in there, and we will use them for active transport if toward the end of your proximal convoluted tubule you have a big difference in your concentration. We haven't talked about the collecting duct. So the whole point of the collecting duct is, if you need to get water back into your blood, it's going to happen here. So if you still have water requirements back into your blood, it's going to happen here. So because of that, obviously, the collecting duct has to be permeable to water. So it'll have these little pores that will open in it and allow water to move back in. The very last bit of this, and it is one that candidates have problems with, is ADH. Now you just have to have the letters, you don't need to know the name, but ADH is anti-diuretic hormone, it's called, and it works essentially on your collecting duct. So when it is there, it is going to affect those pores on your collecting duct. And you have to think now, when is it that you need to take water back in to your blood? What might you be doing? So usually it's going to be a really hot day, you're doing exercise, or it may be because of the food that you are eating. So you may have too much salt in your diet now and too much salt in your blood. And what ADH does is ADH ensures that you absorb water. It promotes fluid retention if you want to do it. Think of it in terms of those words. So when ADH is present, it is going to make sure that you do not have a lot of urine produced. So you'll get small volumes of it. And you have to be able to tell the story of ADH. What does it do? So first and foremost, it's made in your pituitary gland, and it's then released into your blood, and from there it's going to go to your kidney. Okay, once it's at your kidney, it is going to be detected. Okay, so this only happens when, as we say, you are hot, you are sweaty, you are have too much salt in your blood, and you need to retain the water. So once it hits your kidney, it is going to make sure that now your collecting duct is permeable to water. So urine is going to be, you're going to make less urine because water is going to go back into your blood. So you're making less urine. The water is going back into your blood, and the way we describe it is that water is reabsorbed into your blood because you're going to need to do it. And we make a small volume of urine. So usually that's the one that's darker in color as well. Once we get to a scenario where now for some reason you've been drinking water all day, you've been really good, you're listening to your coaches if you're sporty, and you've been just, there's loads and loads and loads of water in your blood all day long. What happens is now the message to your pituitary says stop making ADH. So no ADH gets made. Obviously then there's nothing traveling to your kidneys, and because there's no ADH in your kidneys, your collecting duct now becomes impermeable. So there's no water going back into your blood. It now means you're going to make a large volume of urine. So you're going to be weeing all day long. Sometimes what you find is if you've been told you need to hydrate, they add electrolytes into your whatever it is you're drinking, and the electrolytes will slightly decrease the volume of your water. So the electrolytes here would be like adding salt in, and they would make sure that you're making a little bit of ADH so that you're not, all of the water is going to your cells rather than going to your volume. So for all of these things, you need to just recognize for the in excretion, what is it that the question is asking, and making sure you're giving them the right information. There is a lot to it. So if we go back here, there is a lot to it. But if you can be, I suppose, logical and sequential in your thinking, you definitely use the exam questions. There's enough of them there now that they've asked enough stuff. You can use that as your cheat sheet. So that will work. I'm going to link another video to this, and I'm just going to give you an idea of how you might make links between this really large topic. Because if you look at it, this is now everything that we've done. Okay, I hope this helps.